So we have Kujira, which was one of the chains which rose post Terra Luna implosion and was one of the darlings of the cosmos slash cosmwasm ecosystem, has now catastrophically died almost the same death that happened to Terra back in the day. And essentially, what has occurred is that there was a massive leveraged position that built up over time related to the stable coin that was in the Kujira ecosystem. And when that leveraged position got liquidated, there was a cascading event that caused the Kujira token to just take a massive drop in price. So I think we're seeing like almost the exact same situation play out that we saw in Terra Luna, where Terra had their stablecoin UST, and then there was the money market account essentially that was Anchor, and there were these great gains APY that were being touted and that everybody was chasing, and then there was this deleveraging event that occurred that caused the token to catastrophically fail. And so we're sort of seeing this almost exact same thing play out again on Kujira. And a lot of people are very concerned about this and how it's affecting the entire Cosmos ecosystem. Lucas, I know that this isn't as much in your wheelhouse, but Cosmwasm, Kujira, Terra Luna, you keeping an eye on any of this stuff?
I mean, definitely not in my wheelhouse, but I do think it's interesting because of our expectations with regard to I don't know, the algorithmic stablecoin. So you said a deleveraging event. Like what sort of deleveraging event occurred?
Well, they had been building up a leveraged position, so they had borrowed against the Kujira token, and so this borrowing that had occurred, it it caused their position to be in an upside down, so they got liquidated, and so the liquidation was of the Kujira token. So that's essentially what happened was they were borrowing against it. They were using it as collateral, and if the price doesn't sustain, if there's a massive dump of this KUGI token, then that's when they end up in this upside down position and their position got liquidated. So it's very similar to what we've been talking about and how you can have a collateralized stablecoin, right? Anytime you use a certain thing as collateral for whatever it is that you're doing to borrow, it is predicated on that collateral maintaining its value. And if that collateral loses its value because you have a lot of people that are selling it off, then that's when you end up with these catastrophic collapse events. So that's what's happening here is there was borrowing against the token with the token as collateral, and since the value of the token fell, then a massive position got liquidated, which caused the token to fall even further. And so that's what you're seeing here is this chart where you're seeing this is the price of Kujira over time, and it just took this massive hit. So it's essentially like dropped to sub $1. It's at like 30 cents or something.
And I'm not that familiar with the Cosmos ecosystem either. What is the are you familiar with Cosmos? And if so, like, what's going on in Cosmos? I've heard talk of gaming over in the Cosmos ecosystem. That's the only reason it's ever come up on my radar. What was Kujira being used for? What was Cosmos being used for?
Any of these things, like what is it used for? What is it? It's more token ecosystems. The Cosmos has its own style, so like we have Bitcoin and there's a whole bunch of Bitcoin clones. We have EVM and there's a whole bunch of EVM clones. Then you have Tendermint, and Tendermint is the Cosmos ecosystem. And the reason it's usually referred to as cosmos and cosmosm and whatever, is because that's the underlying technology. And then what had happened was there were a way to fundamentally interact between these chains through a thing called IBC. And so inter-blockchain communication is a way that any of the Tendermint chains can essentially have their liquidity transfer around. And so when IBC got really popular, there was this explosion of L1s in the Cosmos world. And so Kujira is one of them. Osmosis is another big chain in the Cosmos ecosystem. And as far as what it's used for, I don't know. It's mostly just shit coining and the standard gambling and whatever that it seems like most blockchains are used for. I think if you were to ask the question, what is it used for? Almost resoundingly, the answer you're going to get in all of blockchain and crypto is nothing. There is no use case. Like it's just for gambling. That's the pretty standard answer.
Well, I think there's a large contingent of people who use them for gambling, but I do think part of the and I was going to try to look it up, but I'm running a little bit behind here. But I do think part of the idea of and I really like the notion of the multiple blockchains that can communicate with each other, and that aspect of the Cosmos ecosystem. And again, I do think there's a bunch of people who talk about Web3 gaming and look to Cosmos for solutions there. But I'm not in any of those projects, so I don't know the reasons why they're looking at Cosmos. Um, how do you think is this just something that these stable coins, these collateralized stable coins, are going to have to deal with, or is there something that Kujira could have done differently than Luna to forestall this kind of liquidation?
Not borrow so much. I mean, leverage is bad news. I think that what they were doing was they were, paying for the development of their staff and team through this borrowing, and then they just got too deep. I think if you ever end up in a situation where you borrow a lot and there's no real revenues and there's no real thing coming in, eventually that just gets detected and capitalized by people who have enough money to sort of invert the situation. So I think it's you actually have to have real users, real world use case, and you got to actually be doing something real. And the yield that's generated has to be based on fundamentals. If it's not that, then I think you're in a pretty bad situation.
Agreed. Cosmos not started by does the founder of Cosmos not follow you, Grant? Is am I-
The founder of Cosmos. Oh, you mean the person who originally created it?
yes.
Well, I think that I know who that is, but let me do a little bit more research before we dig into that one in particular, because I've heard this, but I don't want to say it unless I've done a little bit of the groundwork. So let me work on that a little bit, and we can get into a bit more of a Cosmos roundup. But yeah, I've got quite a bit of experience with this, just because I was working heavily in the Terra Luna space, kind of during the time when it was exploding all over the place and causing, one of the last great destructions of a blockchain. So I had a chance to be around as these other chains started to rise up and have some prominence. So yeah, I know a little bit about Tendermint.
Well, reach out in that direction and see maybe if the person who made Tendermint might be willing to come talk to us about it. And I also think that we should call these great unravelings, the last great unraveling of blockchain. Um, so, and we also, I did you see more announcements with regards to data layer yesterday?
Not beyond what I had originally, but what we said on the show. No, what else happened with? Data
Oh,
layer.
I saw Michael Taylor, which totally unrelated. But just because we were talking about stable coins and we had also talked about data layer as being other like growing side aspects of blockchains. But I saw more posts from Michael Taylor yesterday, but didn't get a chance to dig deeper. I do think that we should try to get Michael on sooner than later, or Yakahito to tell us what they've been up to over there. But I was hoping actually that you had seen it and dug into it. But just let's moving along. Um, any other thing that you've been noticing in the crypto sphere last week, in between politics and everything else going on, Olympics?
No, I think we can move to the next part, which is we have the ships moving in.
Well, I don't even know. I'm sure this is on many people's radar that that Israel and Gaza have been having a conflict. That it in some ways involves other regional powers, especially Russia, and you know there currently exists a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and the United States is supporting Ukraine, and the United States is supporting Israel. So this should be cause for concern, at least in my book. Yes, Israel. I don't even know where to begin with this. I guess maybe I should start with, because we have mentioned it. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, did recently visit the United States, and notably absent, and not just visited the United States, but gave an address to Congress. And some members did not go to listen to the address, notably Thomas Massey. Ilhan Omar held a sign during its. You know, there was some, I guess, dissent amongst the congressional members as to whether it was proper. And not only that, but President Biden and Vice President Harris, neither of them attended. And I thought that was very interesting when that happened, because that was certainly a signal of you've gone a bit far, rein it in. Wow, around half of the Democrats skipped the speech. I wasn't aware that, I didn't notice that it was so large, but I keep more of an eye on Republicans. There's my darling Thomas Massey. So, and not only that, but after making that address in Washington D.C., on his way back to Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu stopped in Florida to see and speak with no less than Donald Trump, and Donald Trump pledged unquestioning support for Israel. Or I don't know if those were his words, but essentially he reaffirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed support for Israel. So fast forward a week, against warnings from I don't know, Russia and Arab aligned nations in the region. Israel assassinated a Hezbollah leader in Beirut. And a couple of hours later, assassinated another Hezbollah leader in Iran. And after that leader had been at a political or a state event in now I can't think of it, in the capital of Iran, and was staying in apartments of the Iranian Royal Guard Corps. And the method of assassination is also interesting in that Israel had compromised the safe house months ago and left a bomb there. And on confirmation that, or suspicion that this leader of Hezbollah was staying at that safe house, they remotely detonated the bomb in the house. And that just, I mean, we've heard Trump, you know, Trump and J.D. Vance both, and neocon Republicans like Lindsey Graham, start many of their speeches with Iran is the problem. Iran is the problem. This all goes to Iran. Terrorism is supported by Iran. Iran is our true enemy. We've also heard untold complaints from Republicans about the United States releasing the assets that were owned by Iran, that we had seized to Iran, and I forget what the dollar amount was there, but complaints about that being able to, or being used to fund war and terrorism against the United States and the United States allies. So the attack on Iranian soil, Iran informed NATO that they were going to be extracting retribution within 48 hours. This was about 2 days ago that this happened. So the tensions in the region are at an all-time high. The United States has dispatched 12 warships to the area, and I'm nervous, quite honestly. Putin said a couple of days ago that war, or on the heels of that attack in Iran, that war is now unavoidable. All-out war is now unavoidable in the region, and that only a shaky political stability could be achieved in the wake of such a war. So, and I mean, and to add to that, because people might say, well, what is Russia's front in the Ukraine looking like? And Zelensky has now admitted that defeat was imminent, and that Ukraine needed to be looking for options and negotiations, and talking about what sort of territory they would be giving up, and what the end of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict will look like. So we're in dire straits in that area, and to me, when I see the narrative that's circling the United States with regards to the recent Venezuelan election with Nicolas Maduro, they're very much tied together. And why are they tied together? Because, and we talked about this before again, but the United States likes to buy cheap oil from other countries, and if we are no longer able to purchase it from OPEC and the countries in the Middle East that are upset with us for our policies with regards to Israel, then it might be that the United States is looking to secure that with a friendly regime in a closer country like Venezuela.
So since we were running down other political takes on what's going on in Israel, I thought I'd see if I could find the latest on what Kennedy's saying about it. Came up with this. I think this is the best, latest policy position from Kennedy related to what's going on in Israel and Gaza.
Does Kennedy make, can you scroll up on that post? Does he make any pronouncements with regards to Iran?
So there's the breakdown and the bullet points.
Well, he doesn't specifically address Iran, and to me, that's the
this is from a while ago, though. That's from March 9th.
Oh yeah, that's it would be interesting if we could come up with anything more recent. I did listen to Kennedy's speech yesterday, and he did not address Iran specifically. There's also other things that have occurred. Two other things of note. The plea deals with three of the the Guantanamo detainees, which I find like a travesty of American justice for many reasons, which we could get into. I've seen a lot of rhetoric about making a plea deal with terrorists, et cetera, et cetera. I think that ignores some sticky questions with what happened there over the last 20 years. And also, we saw the largest prisoner exchange between the United States and Russia. So the Paul Whelan and Evan, I can't think of his last name, but the Evan, the journalist for the Washington Post that has been in Russia for several months, were both exchanged for um, Russian spies, I guess might be the right phrase, Russian spies from either Serbia or Slovenia. Um, and there were more details in that swap, but mainly the for American interests, it was Paul Whelan and Evan, Washington Post journalist, who are now back in the United States, or on their way back to the United States out of Russia hands. So a lot politically going on in that region, and I think we should all be aware of it. I don't any questions in that sort of like long summation, unsummation, or comments as to thoughts about concerns, etc.
Well, I was still trying to track down some more recent statements from Kennedy about this, and there just doesn't seem to have been any. So I don't know if this just isn't something he's been commenting on much lately, or if it hasn't been a part of what his campaign has been focused on in recent months. So I think this is the best we've got.
Well, his statements with regards to foreign wars and everything, I think, were with an eye towards the I don't know, looming conflict in Asia, like broadly, um, without calling out specifics, because he didn't want to offend any group of supporters of any you know, of any group of supporters that might be hoping for U.S. intervention in the area. But we also talk about here. So we talk so much about crypto. We talk about BRICS. We talk about international monetary policy and international commerce. And it's part of the actions that we've taken with regards to sanctioning Russia, sanctioning Iran, sanctioning companies who do business with them, sanctioning Saudi Arabia when they killed a journalist in Turkey. By the way, that happened in Turkey. And I'm talking about Khashoggi here. Um, the use of sanctions has caused all of these various countries, especially when it happens to their neighbors or actually happens to them, has caused them to question their reliance on the United States dollar. And we had a great era in United States international relations where we understood that, like, you can give money and you can incentivize people to do something by giving more money to some people or more money. But when you start taking it away, they're going to look for alternatives. And uh, we saw recently too, the BRICS now has their own payment network to stand up to the SWIFT payments system. And not only that, but there was a time whenever Russia's interests were not necessarily aligned with China's nor Turkey's. In fact, Turkey and Russia maybe didn't get along so well and were fighting um, over territory around the Black Sea and the use of the Black Sea. But um, the United States has given them common cause, and that's what worries me. Like, the United States seems to have done the best that we could to piss everybody off in Asia. So I've also seen that we've been strengthening our ties and relationships with Japan, and that gives me cause to wonder about what expectations are with regards to holding on to Taiwan, and even what our relationship will look like with South Korea in the future. Because I haven't heard a lot about anything going on there. So, um, but especially the Israel situation or the Iran situation has me nervous, and I think I guess another thing that we haven't added is reports about 2 weeks ago that Iran was within, and this was a report that I heard leading into CrowdStrike, which raised my eyebrows about CrowdStrike or things that might have been going on. But Iran's nuclear program was within days of producing nuclear fissile material, and that was a couple of weeks ago. So we can assume that Iran now has nuclear fissile material, or will have it very soon. And not that Israel and Pakistan and India and Russia and the United States don't have plenty of nuclear weapons to begin with, but it always more heightened tensions as nation states like achieve that ability, as they come into that power. So things to consider, I guess. Uh, Cheerful Black Pill Friday.
You got
Rusty.
you got me thinking about Japan and the recent drop in the value of the Japanese currency. Have you been checking up on that at all? Like they're saying that this is the unwind of the carry trade. People were borrowing
You know,
the
I think I mean, even to maybe correlate the Japanese yen with uh, Kuji and 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 I don't know, currencies or coins that are collateralized in others. I mean, the relationship between Japan and the United States cannot be ignored, especially when considering Japanese economic success or economic problems. And if you want to see, I don't know, evidence of that relationship, take a look at the holdings in the World Bank. The top holder in the World Bank is the United States, and the second largest holder is Japan. The third largest is Great Britain. And going back to the establishment of the IMF World Bank system to distribute, or to use the United States dollar to incentivize, or control other countries in the world, we we used Japan as a I don't know, a straw man, as a as a I don't know. I don't know how to phrase it, but we used Japan to to put forth the notion of diversity in the stakes and the holdings by various countries in that. But remember, coming out of World War II, we dropped atomic bombs on Japan and kept it as a military territory for a number of years, and then proceeded to have a war in Korea, and all the while we're using Japan as a base to launch that from. So
well, this specific thing, there was this thing called the carry trade, the Japanese carry trade, where you would go borrow money from banks in Japan, and you could do that at a 0% interest rate. So you essentially could get free money from Japan, and then you could go take it and do other stuff with it. And so apparently, and what has been theorized is that this has been one of the main drivers of the rapid rise in the price of various tech stocks and whatever in the US, because you would go get money from Japan and then you would go put it into this somewhat risky or lucrative stuff in the US, and that's what's been driving a lot of these really high valuations. So if the yen starts falling and interest rates start rising, that starts to upend that carry trade idea, and you would start to see some of these positions getting unwound and potentially liquidated. And you're not wrong that that's very similar to what is happening with Kujira or anything where you get a lot of leverage, or you start to have a lot of borrowing, and then the fundamental conditions change. So this is definitely something to keep your eye on. There have been interventions which have taken place over the last few months that Japan has tried to salvage the price of the yen, but it's falling pretty rapidly, and it fell substantively, I think, in the last day. So there was a massive drop in the price. So even where this is saying, it fell to 161, I think we're at like 146 right now, which is just a really low price. So something to keep track of, especially with the fall of the Japanese stock market as well. I think it lost like 18%.
Wow. Very interesting. That I had not been paying attention to this. So
I
uh,
have noticed this and seen this a few times across my feed. One of the things that really shows up is the low prices of housing right now in Japan is, and the amount of housing that's available is really becoming an issue. And the reason for that is because Japan is, it's been a very technologically established state for a long time, and they've, really had that, very low numbers of breeding, and they've been very, isolated people because of the technology. There's a large amount of people in Japan that are just isolates. They don't even go outside. They just completely live in their apartments for years. And I've seen, studies and videos on this where those people that live in Japan for 7 years or longer, and they never even left their apartment. Everything just gets delivered to them, and they live and work at a computer-based job, and everything is done on the internet. And there's no society really being built in Japan. It's all just online kind of infrastructure, and the housing and the need for a family is no longer really a big issue or a drive for a lot of Japanese society, and it's starting to become a problem and an issue that it's becoming bigger.
great correlation there, Rusty. We're seeing the same issues in the price of housing, and also the I don't know, in a financial and service economy in the United States with a um, Japan's economy was boosted by providing technological and automotive so automotive products to the United States for quite some time. But um, like it's interesting to look at the United States and notice that the narrative of owning your own house and stepping out of this or not relying on the notion of making money, like being able to relax and retire, maybe travel, do your hobbies, whatever. Like that narrative of life expectancy or expectancy in your life in the United States has collapsed. Kennedy, in his speech yesterday, um, just off the some vague figures that I remember, he said that the average price of a home in the United States 2 years ago was $215,000, and now the average price is $400,000. And I mean, I've definitely have seen, and we also talk about Blackstone, um, and financial companies that have been opened up to owning houses for assets, and also realizing the profit from the rents of those. But I think there's more that goes on too. Um, Kennedy also said he's got 7 children, and his oldest is in his 40s and owns his home, but the other 6 do not own their home. I don't know what the percentage of millennials is that own their homes, but you know, being able to carve out um, a place in which you don't have to constantly work or participate in the economy to continue to live, I think was part of that American dream. I mean, that's what freedom is. It's a place of no taxes or getting out of having to contribute. So I think this is going to be more of a problem that we see in the United States. And the solutions that Japan has come up with in the past, I don't know what the litany of those are, but they haven't worked, quite obviously. The solutions that were put forth by Trump, Harris, and Kennedy, all three, are not, they don't satisfy me. I mean, Kennedy talked about ensuring 3%, a 3% interest rate on loans for first-time homeowners, but that doesn't stop the constant increase in the price of housing.
Well,
And
wait a minute. Like, I like to make sure that we're putting it into the right terms for unit of account, right? If we're talking about it in terms of dollars, yeah, of course the price is going to go up because dollars are worthless. But if we price it in something that has a more stable value over time, then is it really that much changed? So, like, if you price houses in gold, I think they've been relatively stable. If you price in Bitcoin, they're falling.
well, I don't know, price in Bitcoin. I think like
Right? How many Bitcoins does it take to buy a house?
Well, I think one of the reasons for that, Grant, is both Bitcoin and gold are also a rising asset, and the United States dollar, as as we've said multiple times, is a deflating asset and is becoming less valuable. So when you put it into context of gold, that's also rising at some of the same inflation rate or same increase of the dollar that the house is being priced off of in the beginning, it can kind of seem a little stabler, but yeah, when compared to just off the dollar, it really begins to just come out of control, and that's really what I think the issue is going to be if we start to put Bitcoin on as a strategic asset reserve, and how we can start to see some of these large numbers that people are talking about. Because if you make Bitcoin a strategic reserve, and now the base of the dollar is based off of Bitcoin, and now Bitcoin needs to be subsidized to the value of the dollar and rise and cost to show that it can just really spiral out of control really quickly.
well, there's also not. I mean, actually, I don't want to focus on Bitcoin right now. I want to focus on 1920 because the price of a home in 1920 was a lot different than the price of a home in 1930, and and it's interesting that we see here like this correlation between 1920 and 2020. Um, sure, like well, what was the same in 1920 and 2020 was that the
I wasn't necessarily trying to laser in on these specific dates. I was trying to
well
recast this into unit of account. That
well and I think that's wonderful to do, and point well taken, but also um I mean, so then let's turn to look at the narrative of history in the United States. Like what happened in 1929, the price of housing collapsed. I have a house that in Colorado that and I have the abstract for it, which is absolutely fascinating. And the price of that house increased in value. It was built in 1904 or maybe 1899. I can't remember, but you can look at all the sales of the house, and they go up to about $7,000 in 1925, and in 1930 it sold for $5, and it was $1 in hand and $4 in consideration because nobody had any cash.
consideration. Wow, that's a term you don't hear much in finance these days.
No, I thought that was fascinating. That was that was before or yeah, it was in $1 in hand and $1 in consideration, or $4 in consideration. And but a $7,000. Imagine having $7,000 one day and having $1 the next. We're in crypto. Everybody can do that. But the other things that happened or that were going on with that I think are analogous to what are going on now is that we had seen what is the Gilded Age about? But about capitalists who had gotten their hands on an outsized amount or percentage of the assets, the homes, the businesses in America. And I think we see that now. It's also interesting to see this whole, the FOMC and the Federal Reserve interest rates were released yesterday or the day before, and everyone's praying for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. So the price of money is closer to zero. But is that a real economy? And does that actually benefit people who want to go out and make something or do something in the world? Because if the only way to, or if we are giving preference or advantage to financial institutions instead of businesses that are succeeding because people like their product or like their service, but instead are succeeding because they get larger and larger and larger. That's part of the problem that we see with the Federal Reserve and the national banking system is that they again and over and over they put privilege to larger institutions. It's another thing that I see that drives me crazy. Going back to the Kennedy speech, he talks about wanting to incentivize small businesses, and I forget what his example of a small business was, but all politicians talk about wanting to help small businesses. And in everyone's mind, a small business is one, like when you close your eyes and you picture a small business, you picture it by the number of employees. But when legislators go and sit down and write the rules to privilege small business, they do so by the number of owners. And that's part of the problem that we see today. You can have a small business like, I don't know, Georgia Pacific or Bain Capital, and it's small because it's only owned by a couple of people. And this is one of the things that that Congress could be changing immediately is defining small businesses by the number of employees instead of the number of owners. That's just an aside.
So one of the other things that we had said that we were going to talk about today is Turkey blocking access to Instagram. Do you want to jump on that for a couple minutes?
Well, I just saw that leading in. I mean, there's a couple of things that I think it speaks to.
I think this is interesting because you see Turkey sort of getting progressively removing itself from the EU and the canonical position of the European comrades. They were trying to join the EU for a long time, and I think that's pretty well dead at this point, right?
Well, it's I would say dead, but they are a member of NATO, and look at how they use their position in NATO to Israel was calling for them to be booted from NATO because Turkey seems to be siding more and more with Russia. With going back to what I said earlier about Turkey, they've always been a bit of a stepchild in the European Union and NATO. So I had a friend who lived in Turkey, played volleyball there actually in the early 2000s, and I remember talking to her when she got there, and I said, "What's it like?" And she said, "There's no internet." And I said, "Wow, you mean you can't get on the internet?" And she said, "Oh no, it's just everything is blocked. There's no YouTube. there was no Instagram at the time, but you know, like there was no YouTube. And I said, why no YouTube? And she said, well, because it's such a conservative country. It
It just seems strange to block Instagram, though. I mean, is there really a lot of, I don't know, political thought shared on Instagram? I thought that
well,
was mostly like influencers and posting pictures of their vacations. Maybe I don't have a good sense of what Instagram really gets used for these days. I mostly Rolex.
well, there's both the not just their vacations, Grant. There's a lot of you know, hot and sexy bodies on Instagram, and sort of a leaning down that cultural avenue that, again, like an Islamic um, an Islamic society is not uh, is not, I guess, super excited about.
Yeah, it's against their modesty rules and what they would like to see for society in
Yes,
general.
modesty. That's the word that I was looking at. But there's also something else that's going on with Instagram, and we've heard it. We know, we're aware of it here in the United States, although nobody seems to care about it. And that is um, the the content moderation, and content moderation that is done so with an eye on politics. Um, and look at what the United States is doing with regards to Venezuela right now. Look at what Google, allegations of Google with regards to searching for Trump. Like, go to it. You know what? Bring up a Google search page right now and type in assassination of T, and see what pops up. Like we operate under these notions that that are that are companies that are providing services for us for the internet, you know, searching content and cataloging it, and privileging it by what is either correct or common. That's not that what is actually happening. And so I would imagine, like, Erdogan is already in a tenuous position politically in his country. The Turkish, I think it's a lira, the Turkish currency, you know, they've been pursuing sort of the same, like, inflation, um, to perpetuate, I don't know, political stability there, and waiting, you know, dreading the other foot dropping, but also are turning towards a more conflict with Israel in the West. And I would imagine that Turkey doesn't want to give the West an advantage in starting the narrative with you know, what their choices are politically, or how their relationship is going forth with the United States, Israel, or Russia, or the European Union. So that to me would be the actual driver of what's happening there, because you know, Instagram is popular all around the world, modesty with or without standing or notwithstanding. So you know, I wonder, because well, I wonder what other countries are turning off Instagram too, because there's a lot of countries in the area, North Africa and the Balkans, that are very much under that economically depend on Turkey. So it is fascinating that they cut off Instagram this morning, and I think it has more to do with than modesty. Put it that way.
Well, interesting that it's only this one particular social media that got called out.
Well, I wonder if they had got TikTok there, if it was already banned. Did you happen to see, because we do have the Olympics going on, did you happen to see pictures of the sharpshooter from Turkey?
Yes, it's been kind of a fun thing to see everybody gravitating towards this guy that seems like he just rolls up with none of the rest of the gear that anybody else is using, and manages to get silver, just standing there with almost nothing except for the gun in hand. Yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, and when they said, you know, like, what drives you, and he was like, "Oh, my wife left me, divorced me, and I wanted to prove to her um, that that I was something." Um, Probably my greatest, my favorite story that I've seen from the Olympics so far, and I haven't been following that closely, but I think we're going to see the image of the turkey sharpshooter. That will be that's going to be meme gold for many years on the internet. It's going to be right there next to you know, all of our favorites. I don't even know how to begin describing all of our favorite memes. Anything else? Anything else on your mind? We've still got a couple of minutes before we close it out and hit the weekend. That's sort of all that I wanted to um, bring up with regards to you know, politics, world politics, and things going on in the Middle East right now. What you got here? Oh,
This is kind of the animeification of this guy doing this particular shot, just that he would walk up with nothing, both eyes open, you know.
the nonchalance is just beautiful. You know, my other favorite one, and my sister turned me on to this, is the man in the pastel speedo that walks around the swimming pool and dives in to pick up the caps. That's another pretty good one.
One other thing that happened at the Olympics was the race where they were swimming in the Seine, and then everybody puked because it was so disgusting and
Oh,
terrible.
the triathlon. I didn't, you know, I saw that there were concerns even weeks ago. The mayor of Paris swam in the Seine to prove that it was going to be clean enough, but then they had a couple of rains. That's kind of gross. That's kind of gross, but you know, oh well. I did. I'll have to go check out for pictures and the reports of the vomiting afterwards. You know, I used to swim a lot too, and I don't like swimming in dirty water. Um, I swam in a pool once that gave me ear infections because they couldn't keep the pH balance of their water correct.
Here,
Ew.
Lucas, I saved you from having to go find it.
Thanks. That's a beautiful. I mean, that's also like a perfect end to our Black Pill Friday. Vomiting on loop. You know, are they throwing up because the water was gross, the Parisian sewer, or are they throwing up because they're exhausted? There could be that too.
Oh no, they're
I
just throwing up because water is gross. Period. I mean, I've gone through this myself. I was in the Marine Corps, and they did over waterization to us, and I can't even drink water to this day, 20 years later, without wanting to puke. Just like plain water, like just the smell of it almost makes me want to just gag automatically, just because it brings back the flashbacks of. Because when I was in the Marine Corps, I went through a time when I was in California, and the temperature, was well over 100 degrees. Sometimes when I was in, Pendleton, 29 Palms area, it would get to 120 degrees. And when it gets that hot, they'd rather you be overhydrated than underhydrated, and they'd rather be oversafe than undersafe. And I remember they would make us do segments of where we would puke until we filled up 55-gallon garbage cans and then continue more water drinking.
What?
Yeah, there was incidents in boot camp where, they would bring out 55-gallon trash cans and they would force you to drink water until you puked and filled up the trash can and then continue to drink more water.
That doesn't sound logical.
It's not logical. And I've had instances of where I've known many people who have had a really bad instance of overhydration, where they drink so much water that the salt in their body gets depleted in the amount of where they have overhydrated. And you can be overhydrated and have a sickness and a reaction just like being underhydrated.
You know, I used to be chronically dehydrated again playing sand volleyball, and I learned the hard way that whenever you start cramping in a tournament, the way to fix it is not to. It's one thing to drink a beer; it's another thing to drink a pitcher of margaritas, because all that sugar in your system can lead to a shock. But man, I can't imagine filling up a 55-gallon drum. Did they ever like make you like dive and I mean I'm sure they made you do like extended underwater operations.
Oh yeah, that's definitely extended underwater operations, and there's the water training for the United States Marine Corps, where once you get to the first class, which is basically the top one, they basically try to teach you to drown. Like the instructors are there to basically try to drown you, and your role is to break away from the drowning of the person trying to drown you to be able to survive. To kind of insulate. If you're in the middle of the ocean water and somebody's panicking, they're not going to really be considering what they're doing. They're going to try to grab on you just to pull you under as a panic, and they try to simulate that, but they simulate it at such an extreme that it almost becomes abusive, and it's very toxic for some of the people, and it really can become you know just the extreme at which they go to some of the training is really negative. One thing I was going to talk about is there used to be past experiences. I don't know if they do this so much anymore, but I was stationed in 29 Palms, and in 29 Palms, the sewage system is an open air sewage system, and they used to make the people in the uniform train and run through the open sewage system as part of their physical activity of the day. And they didn't do that when I was actually active. They didn't make us actually run through the extra sewage and the waste, but they would make us train and do physical activity right next to it. And the smell and the heat and just the torture of that was almost unbearable.
So what about today, Rusty? Do you like getting in the water today, or is it
Oh yeah, I've always been a fan of swimming. I got class two when I was in the swimming in the Marine Corps. Part of my MOS, you had to have a class two swimmers to get into the MOS I was in, because we were light armored reconnaissance. We had a vehicle that could float on the water, and so if we ever did one of those missions where we were coming from the water onto the land, they wanted to make sure we had the ability and a qualified swim qualification. But I still love the water today. I'm a huge fan of the water. I've always been a fan. I love to swim. I wish I got in the water more. I really like it. It really helps out with my ankles. I don't know if many people on the show know this, or you guys, but a couple years ago, I had an incident, or an on-the-job roofing incident, where I shattered both my ankles. And I've been recovering from that. And, my ankles were put together with pins, rods, and screws. And it really helps when I can get into the water and have that release of my weight and buoyancy, and be able to just fully move and articulate my ankles, and just exercise around, and build up those bones and those muscles again, and just to be able to just move and stretch without having the full weight of your body. And the water is really great for that. And swimming, in compared to just working out in the waters, is two different things. I think swimming is a really intensive sport and takes a lot of activity to do. And I was always never really a great swimmer when it came down to the actual strokes of swimming. That's what stopped me from getting first class in the Marine Corps. Is I was never really good at having a perfect breaststroke, or a perfect a butterfly stroke. I think there was like 3 or 4 strokes that they wanted you to have in the Marine Corps, the backstroke. And so whenever it came to me being able to swim, I would pretty much just doggy paddle or breaststroke, and I could go forever as long as I did that. I remember there was one time I was trying to qualify in the Marine Corps, and I'd gotten all the way almost, there was like a 50-meter swim. You had to go 50 meters, and I was about 5 feet away, maybe 5, 6 feet away from the end. I was like, I'll just turn over my back and just float over, and it'll be a nice, easy way to just calmly end the competition, or in the whatever the thing we need, the 50-meter race. And as soon as I went over to my back, I just ended up sinking. I couldn't really float. I wasn't good at the back float, and I had to end up getting pulled out of the pool, dragged all the way back, and had to swim the 50 meters again.
uh that swimming 50 meters is I don't know if I could do it. I don't know. I'd have to build up to swimming that far. What about do you ever go if you and sorry to hear about your ankles. Do you ever go wade up the animus, or is it not deep enough, or is it too swift?
I don't really deal with the animus. It's kind of not really deep enough right now. When I've tried to tube down it before, and before I injured my ankles, it was a lot of fun. I used to really enjoy the animus and going down the river. But nowadays, I just kind of skip across the rocks, and I don't want to be slipping and have an unsteady ground with my ankles. And so it's not worth the risk. It was kind of the same thing when I went down to the ocean. I went down to San Diego a couple of years ago to visit Doug TenNapel. He goes down there every year for the Comic-Con. And I was down there, and my buddy, his nephew, I was talking with, and we wanted to go to the ocean. And he was like, just get on the ocean. You have so much fun. Just get in the ocean. It'll be so great. You'll love it. And, for me, it wasn't really that great at all because the waves were just throwing me around and I was just landing and jumping on my ankles. And it wasn't really, that much of an enjoyable and experience for me as much as my friend was thinking it was going to be like, oh, you'll just be able to float around the ocean and have fun. And it really wasn't. The tides and the ground was kind of unnatural and unshifting below me, and I wasn't really that great just to be out in the ocean.
I know we're on the top of the hour or the end of the hour, but I saw some news with Comic-Con, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Did you guys did you do anything at Comic-Con catch your eyes?
I didn't catch too much other than just seeing the announcements from Marvel that they're trying to garner support for the next round of the Avengers movies, but not much beyond that.
Yeah, I didn't really see too much for Comic-Con itself. I saw a few, Robert Downey Jr. made an appearance, and there's a few big name people that stopped by, but it kind of got overcasted by the Bitcoin conference and everything going on with the political views on the internet and the main social media. I mean, I saw a few posts on my Twitter because I follow Mike Miller and Doug TenNapel and stuff like that, and I saw a post where they were fishing together yesterday on the pier, which I thought was really cool to see them actually getting some time together to enjoy themselves. But I think that the Comic-Con itself was really just, it happens every year, and it wasn't really that big of a subject as compared to the other things.
Well, I'll see if I can track down the news that I saw, but enjoyed it. We're on the end of the hour. I don't know if y'all have anything else you want to mention before we go, but other than that, we'll see you on Monday.
See you on Monday.